Welcome to the Comedy Capital, a virtual happy hour conversation presented by Humanitini. Joining today's conversation is Tony Rock, Jack Coleman, Tommy Taylor Jr., and supposedly Tony Woods. Let's join the conversation. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Comedy Capital. Good to see all these faces and blank screens up here. Let's see. I see you.
Okay.
There you go. Okay.
It's Tony Rock.
We're having a little technical difficulty, but we're here. We're live, and we're about to get it in. Thank everybody for coming.
Who's on? Who's here?
Everybody except for Woods at the moment. I was with him last night. He said he's gonna be trying to pop in, but we'll see.
Hey, just so everybody knows, Tommy sent me a T-shirt also. He said wearing that was optional, so I opted hell no. But I will show you that I have the T-shirt. I opted no, and then he sent me some Metro cards. I don't know what these are for.
All right, that's paraphernalia.
He sent me Metro cards in an edible package. So I thought they were for like the weed dispensary or something, but I don't know.
No. Yeah.
All right.
Funny. They let other people in? Yeah, you got to get invite right.
Y'all having whole conversations. All right. All right. So
put some more light on me. Can you see me?
Yeah, I can see. All right, this is a little mic test. Getting everybody in the building, everybody squared away. What's up, everybody? My name is Tommy Taylor Jr. We're going to jump right into it. We're a couple of minutes behind, but it's COVID. It's 2020. This is what we do. We go with the flow. So really happy to have everyone here. Very quickly, let me go over a couple little housekeeping. If you can turn your mic off, or we might mute you. But we do want it to be a very interactive conversation. If y'all have questions, jump in definitely. And what we're going to do is, if in the chat room, we have comedian Mike B leading our chat room. So say what's up, Mike.
What's going on, everybody? I didn't get a shirt.
Tony can send you his. We all have our Comedy Capital shirts. We're going to send Tony UPS label, so Mike can get his shirt. But yes, Mike's going to be leading our chat room. And what we're going to do is, if y'all have questions during this, Mike's going to pick people, just say what's up, I have a question, or even type your question in the chat box. And then we're going to spotlight you so you can ask your question live in front of everybody to make it as interactive as possible. I know we're socially, actually I hate the word socially distant, we're physically distant, but we're going to be socially interactive tonight in our Zoom. All right, and this is also a happy hour, so if y'all have some drinks, it could be some alkaline water. You don't have to be alcoholic, but grab a little beverage. I got my beverage here. I hit up Imperial Wine and Spirits, which is a woman-owned and minority-owned company here in DC, and I have a little bottle of my own. So it's been a long quarantine, so I'm gonna start out with my sippy cup. We can go ahead straight to the bottle. That's crisp. That's so crisp. Tom, where's your drink at?
I got to get one. I was making sure time because I was having problems logging in, so I didn't have time to put the shirt on or get a beverage ready.
He just want to be a rebel. You and Tony Woods, the Tonys are rebels. All right, shoot, let me see what else we got. So we got a chat room. Feel free to ask. But you got friends, tell them to come on into the Zoom, because we're gonna make it do what it do. So jump into the actually, let me turn the music down a little bit. I was trying to set some ambiance real quick. Let me just tone this down. It's my man Snoogie in the background. So today's topic is very near and dear to my heart. It's about the historic DC comedy scene. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Tommy Taylor Jr. I'm an actor, comedian, and filmmaker from right here in Southeast DC. And DC's always been very close to my heart. So actually, when I first started doing stand-up, I started a sketch comedy show, a television show. So I put on television. It was like a 30-minute format. My background is engineering, so I made it look very polished, packaged it up. People thought it was like a real TV show. And instantly I started getting deals. I got like deals with Verizon, Bright Cove, got some on-demand nationally. A lot of different things were happening. And one thing I always wondered is, like, why do people have to leave DC to really make it? And my whole thing, I really, and probably that's why I'm not super famous now because I haven't really fully left, although I'm more in LA back and forth now. But it's a big thing. Like, why do you have to leave DC? Because if you think about it, DC has the most famous, probably the most famous comedians per capita are produced from DC. If we got people, and nobody really realizes it. So we have like Martin Lawrence, Dave Chappelle, Tony Woods, who will be joining us here in a little bit, Wanda Sykes, Jay Farrow, even up-and-comers like Avant Orgy on HBO's Insecure, Rory Scovel. The list go on and on. If you put together your top 10 comedians, pretty sure you're gonna have a few of those from DC. And so my overall question is, like, why don't people realize DC is a comedy capital, basically? And what can we do to kind of change that? So here on our distinguished panel, I have some of my favorite comedians and some of my just awesome good friends here tonight. And we're gonna start alphabetical order. So, and each of them have a special relationship to DC, which is why I asked them to come on to the panel tonight. So, alphabetical order, and to start out with some diversity, my man, Mr. Jack Coleman in the building.
Yeah.
Jack Coleman is one of the co-founders of Capital Laughs, which is a comedy organization here in DC, which produces about before when the world was open, they produced about 14 shows a week. So if you're on a comedy circuit, like, you can hit up one of their, just only for their shows, you can do like 2 or 3 shows a night, which is really vital to becoming a, to honing your craft. He's also a comedian and recently also did a TED Talk on the comedy scene here in DC. So without further ado, let me give it up for Mr. Jack Coleman. Let me get a little, y'all got your mics on, I can't hear the claps, but. What's up, Jack? Say a couple words real quick.
What's up, Tommy? Thanks so much for having me. My name's Jack Coleman. I've been in DC doing comedy about 5 years. Capital Laughs up to mirror that organization right there. Used to run a bunch of shows. We had everywhere from like an entry-level show, which was the Comedy Shuffle, where anyone could show up and sign up, and then an experienced comic would give them time, all the way to like paid headliner shows, that sort of thing. So we kind of cover the gamut of, let's say, I don't know, AA, AAA-ish baseball here in DC, if you will. Okay. And yeah, excited to be here. Yeah, did a TED Talk. So like, I can't say, check out my TED Talk.
No, you just repeat
like
my whole intro to you. And you're not voting for Trump, right? I know you look like you might be a Trump supporter, but you're
You gave me the white shirt, okay? I didn't pick it out. But yeah, I do like this shirt. Great work. On the back it has our names. Oh my God, Tommy, thank you so much. Great shirt. Yes, I am from Alabama. Both of my parents do support Trump. You should see our group chat. It is ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
All right, so that's Jack Coleman. Also on the panel, who's not here right now, is DC legend Tony Woods. It's been raining here in DC today, and Tony lives on a houseboat, so I think his Wi-Fi got wet. But he's gonna be joining us as soon as it dries off or whatever. So Tony will be in the building. He FaceTimed me a few minutes ago. So, but it's Tony Woods. He's a diva. So yeah, we're gonna get him. But without further ado, we'll bring up our final panelist. Oh, real quick before I bring him up, I'm going to introduce our sign language interpreter, Mr. Billy Sanders. You see him signing right there in the corner. So for anybody who ASL or hearing impairments, you can watch along as Billy signs. And he just had a feature on NPR. And to my knowledge, there's not too many African American male interpreters. So and the brother shop. Look at him. He made me want to bring my jackets. I'm gonna put my jacket on too, so I can look good. Oh, you're not gonna outdo me on my show. Oh, nigga. I'm sorry. Look. The show is in partnership with the DC Humanities DC, Humanitini, and the DC Commission on Arts and Humanities. And by no means are any other words or sayings associated with I forgot the verbiage, but they're not fully legally responsible for anything we say tonight. There we go. Without further ado, let me bring up our final panelist tonight. Man, my good friend, my brother, one of my favorite comedians, honestly, and one of my personal mentors. I don't know if he knows he mentors me, but I'm writing stuff down and watching the brother. Just dynamic dude, part of the Rock family dynasty. like everybody in the family is hilarious. From Brooklyn, New York, movie star, actor, comedian. He's starting his world tour up again, wearing a mask. I'm not sure how but he's going to be in New Jersey next week. Fabulous person, hilarious comedian, my brother, Mr. Tony Rock.
Yo, what's up, everybody?
Oh, there.
Appreciate the intro, but I prefer comedian first, as always, before actor and whatever else you say. Comic first. But to answer your question, I don't think that people don't realize that DC is a comedy scene. You said, why don't people realize DC is a comedy scene or look at it as a comedy scene? I think people realize that DC is a comedy scene. What it is not is it's not a comedy destination. It's not like you start out in the Midwest and you say, hey, when I get good, I'm going to move to DC. You look at New York and LA more so for that reason, or maybe even on a lower scale, Chicago and Atlanta. But DC isn't a comedy destination. There are several beasts in comedy that have come out of DC. But when you do what comedy is like was it Jack that said it's like baseball? When you get good at that level, you have to move on to the next level. So I think DC will birth a beast, but then it's just, you rite of passage that you have to go to a bigger city to play.
But I think there's something to like being that DC produces so many comedians, but there's nothing really here to foster that, I would say. So like, why do you have to go to New York or LA? And there's differences in the comedy scenes there, even being able to get on stage time, get work and things like that. We're going to touch on that in just a second. But right before we do that, I want to, our panelists, I'm going to start with this basic question. What is your most memorable DC comedy moment? You have a memorable DC comedy moment.
Who's the question for?
All of y'all. We can start with you. So.
My most memorable DC moment was I did I have two. I'll give you two. One was headlining the Improv New Year's Eve. Okay. And as most touring comics know, that New Year's Eve is like triple the money that you would normally get on a normal weekend. And it's New Year's Eve, so it's a great way to start the new year off at my favorite comedy club. For me, it was a great way to start the new year off at my favorite comedy club. The money was incredible. The crowds are always incredible. And it was very memorable for me. Secondly was being in the audience at the Constitution Hall when my brother taped Bring the Pain.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was a good one. And I didn't say that, and you just mentioned it, your connection to the panel is also like DC is like your favorite comedy city to perform in.
Yes, my favorite city outside of performing in Brooklyn or just being home in the local comedy clubs. If I got to be on the road, my favorite club to perform in the entire country is the DC Improv.
Awesome. And let me ask Jack the same question. Your most memorable DC comedy moment.
Okay, so Tony kind of hit like the like high note there, right? Okay. Let me take it down to the other end. My most memorable moment was when I was hosting a show at Town Tavern, and this bringer, who's like a new person in comedy, who brings some friends, he was, he's going to be later on the list, right? I was explaining this to him. He got like a little physical with me, and like I like jujitsu'd him to the ground, right? And he apologized, and I was like, all right, you can still go on, which was a huge fucking mistake. Sorry for my language. So anyways, he goes on. Okay, he goes on. It's not going well. Okay, it's not going well at all. One of the worst sets I've ever seen. And he starts to do crowd work, and so he goes up to a guy in the crowd, and he goes, "Hey, sir, so what do you do?" And the guy goes, "Well, I'm an accountant." And then he goes, "So like, how long have you been thinking about killing yourself?" And then the guy goes, "I don't know, like 3 minutes." Like, bro, show stopped. Okay, I fall off the table I was sitting on. Oh man, it was so like having someone like touch me in a very threatening way, and then that happened that's just stuck on my head.
Okay. in Town Tavern, that's a really cool. It was like a 30-40 seater, but it's like real intimate. So it's a very fun place to perform. So I could Yeah, that's a good story.
I have a question for Jack. Is that how white guys tell? Is that how white guys tell their "I had to fuck a dude up" stories? Because that was.
I mean, yeah, it was gentle. But yeah, basically. You know.
Yeah, I would pay to see Jack in a fight. Oh man. And I guess I'll answer the same thing. My most memorable DC comedy moment actually was I was selected to be a comedian at the Go-Go, I think it was like the National Go-Go Awards. It was at the Lincoln Theater. So this was like, I was pretty new in the comedy. So this was at the Lincoln Theater, which was my first like big theater show. It might have been my first Go-Go show also. And so I'm like, I'm like, okay. I'm a little nervous because like, the Go-Go crowd is a little bit different. And yeah, it's a little bit, harder. So I was like, all right, and I don't curse in my performances or whatever. So, I was like, so I was trying to get in my head, whatever. And so I get there, a little amped, so I walk in the front. And then the lady's like, oh, the performance got to go around back. And I was like, okay. So I walked around all the way around the block to the back. They got this gate. I walk in, and they had security there. He's like, all right. He's like, what you doing? And I was like, I'm the comedian on the show. And my face was the biggest face on the flyer. And I was like, yeah, I'm the comedian. I'm Tommy Taylor. I'm here to perform or whatever. He's like, all right, let me look at the list. So he looks like, all right, well, so yeah, I don't see you on the list. I was like, so I put out a flyer. I was like, but I'm on the flyer. He's like, yeah. He's like, okay, but like, I don't see you on the list. I go by the list. And I was like, yo, but the flyer is bigger than the list. So I'm literally outside arguing with this dude about like why. I'm literally, my face is literally on the flyer. I was like, I can't even get in. So I had to call the promoter dude. After about 10 minutes, he finally comes, all right, he's good or whatever. So I go in. But since I'm not on the list, I don't get a backstage pass. So I go down to the dressing room. So I come up just to like get a peek at what the stage stuff is like. And right when I do that, there's another security. He's like, hey, where's your pass at? I was like, I don't got a pass, but I'm on the flyer. He's like, nah, son, you can't come up here. I'm like, I'm about to perform. And so anyway, it was a whole lot of that the whole day. And I get out there and like, because of my first theater performance, DC go-go bands, like I walk out on stage, it was pitch black because like the lights shine right at you. All I could smell was Hennessy coming from the audience. And when you're performing, like the acoustics kind of mess with me. So it was like you hear an echo because the joint was so big. And that was my first time doing that. I didn't have no sound test or anything, and I couldn't tell if I should wait for laughter or just kind of keep powering through my set. So I didn't get booed, but it was a really weird experience. At least I don't think I got booed that day, but that was my memorable comedy experience here in DC.
You didn't have a pass. You should have took the flyer and put it around your neck.
Yeah, actually, I tried that. Like they weren't respecting the flyer that day at all. All right, so back to our DC comedy talk. Like, why is DC a great comedy city? Why don't people really realize that? Why is it not a DC destination, as Tony so eloquently put it? So my first question into that part is like, what makes a good or bad comedy city? Like, what makes it like what are good traits or bad traits about a city that makes it a good comedy destination? Anybody?
So are you saying comedy destination or comedy city?
I'm gonna switch the verbiage to destination since
Okay.
We eloquated that.
I got no fucking idea, Tony. So
Can I
You're gonna have to answer this one, man.
Can anyone speak?
listen?
Yeah.
Wait, somebody wants to talk. Go ahead. I don't want to step on anybody's toes.
No, I think you're good.
Yeah, I was
Okay,
just.
well-
Okay.
Oh, who's that?
Go. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Somebody go.
The floor is yours, sir.
Somebody say something.
I just got muted. DC is a great hothouse for comedy, but what people don't remember is that DC is a small town. It has big town amenities because it's a national comedy. I mean, it's a national capital, but DC is the same size as Memphis. It's the same size as Little Rock, Arkansas. It's like 1.8 million people. That's what makes it not a destination. I mean, if you think of the places, New York, LA, Chicago, they are 3, 4, 5, 6 times the size of DC. Even when Houston was the hot place for comics to come out of, it had 3.5 million people. So DC is a great place to start doing comedy because you have people from all over the country here that come for government work. So you're forced to be less regional because the crowd is less regional, but you're not going to get the same look as you will in a big city like New York or LA.
Mm-hmm. Are you in the Starship Enterprise? Like what?
Yeah, I am. I'm doing shows. I'm at Flappers tonight, and I've been doing shows all week. So it's
Okay. And then Chip Jones is a comedian as well.
Chip.
I agree with what he got. He had all the statistics. That was good. So I think that like DC is you talked about diversity. I think which is really cool is that like in DC you have, especially now, you have like everybody. Like in a common crowd you have white, black, all different ethnicities, religions. I mean, just everybody, it's like a hodgepodge. And I think that's what makes DC comedians coming from DC so well rounded, because you kind of have to be a chameleon in a way. Because like in New York, for instance, like I don't know, for me, you can usually tell a New York comedian because like, they have a certain sound or like what part of New York they're from. Like everybody kind of represents certain parts. Whereas DC is like, it's not really like a real place of belonging here, I don't think. So like it's like if you're a black, like if you're black, you live on maybe one side of town, but you're going to go across town to work with a completely different type of people. So you're like in two different worlds on a daily basis. So you automatically like code switch. And then like as a comedian, like you're code switching to be able to relate to all the different audiences. So I think DC kind of forces you to like homogenize. That's the right word?
Sounds good.
Yeah, basically that's because DC, you got to keep in mind, DC is not just DC. DC is the DMV. Mm-hmm. So it's people from Virginia that, work or play in the DC area. It's people from Maryland that work or play in the DC area. So you're going to get a mix of different cultures, different ethnicities because of that. But to go back to the original question about why it wasn't a comedy destination, to kind of piggyback on what the brother said that was rocking the troop jacket. There's like 20 comedy clubs in New York City. So that's off top. There's 20 comedy clubs in New York City. There's like 8 in LA. So just by virtue of numbers, you need to move out of DC to just, because the only way you get good as a stand-up comic is repetition. And if there's not a lot of stages to hit, then you have to get out of there to get better at your craft. It's an art form. If you don't get to repetitiously, work on your art, then you don't get better. That's another reason why people leave.
All right, so I would counter that with, so you're right, like New York, LA, even Chicago have like a lot more comedy clubs, but DC has a lot of comedy venues, I would say, maybe more so. Like you're a better testament to this. Like in LA, you have, even if you're doing, you got the major clubs kind of like near each other, but you usually have to be a big name to get on one of those shows, right? And then like if you're trying to like hit 2 or 3 mics to get that repetition, you got to drive probably like an hour each way just to hit different like mics or open mics or like little comedy shows. Whereas in DC, I think like Capita, Jack shows alone, you could probably do 2 or 3 shows a night on his, and like there are a couple different little comedy collectives which produce shows. Like literally you could probably, and all of them have usually like good crowds. So like the venue's gonna be full, even if it's like a 40, 50 seater, like you're gonna get a full like attentive audience. Is well organized. So like you could, on the humble, you could probably do 4 to 5 shows a night, like walking up and down the street, not even with a car, like all within like 10 minutes of each other, and really get that repetition up.
Well, that's.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, well, that's why I don't recommend LA as a comedy destination. I don't recommend, if you want to be a comic, I tell people all the time, if you want to be a comic, go to New York. If you want to just be famous because you're on TV, go to LA. Because LA doesn't really promote the art form of stand-up. LA is, you get on TV and then you start doing stand-up. Jamie Kennedy's not a comic. Anthony Anderson, not a comic. But since they're on TV doing sitcoms, comedic acting, in LA, that's like the door just opens to be a stand-up comic. New York, rather, is the art form of stand-up comedy. We don't put you on stage just because you had a funny line in a sitcom. So To be a comic, go to LA. If you want to be an actor that got on and now you can do bad stand-up, then go to LA.
Yeah, again, I think that DC segment is the hothouse. Yeah, you can do 2 or 3 mics a night, every night. I mean, we've had comedians like Eli Sayers who did 3 shows a night for a full year, but that's only going to get you that level of being a proficient open micer to getting a guest spot or maybe a feature. But if you're going to make that next climb up that rung to being full feature and headliner, you're going to move to New York or somewhere bigger. But like I said, if you're a starting comic, DC is a perfect place to be because you can get a lot of stage time, you can do a lot of reps, but it's not going to take you to that level where you're not in front of majority chairs telling your jokes, but you're actually in front of a comedy crowd, and you get a real read on whether or not this is just a task you've learned to do well, or you're actually an artist at it.
I can see what you're saying, Chip. I think you're right about DC. It's not, you can't like really headline from here. It's like very, very hard to headline from here. Mm-hmm. I think though that one of the things that's very unique about the crowds here is they're by far like the smartest crowds of anywhere in the country. And like, there's data. The DC has twice the number of bachelor degrees of any other state in the country, and the people turn over a lot here. So you get a very, very, very smart crowd,
right? Usually
smarter than you, that usually works for Congress or a congressional parasite. Right. And then in 2 to 5 years, they're gone, and then somebody else comes in. So
right, which is what I said at the beginning. I mean, the thing about it too is it's not even talking about, well, I get to do black crowds or white crowds. Or whatever. I get to do people from Idaho. I get to do people from Connecticut. I get to do people from Florida. I get to do people from Texas. So you get a more birth of sort of a regional, like most comics when they start out in their hometown, they're going to be telling jokes that work for that region. But here in DC, you've got to learn to be able to tell jokes for every region of this country, because that's the crowd that we get. And like I said, that's what makes this a great hothouse place, is because comics, that's why we get people like Patton Oswalt breaking out and stuff like that, is because they learned the craft early here for a broad sense of comedy and making it their own. But to get to that level where you're actually doing the numbers, that propels you, you're going to have to go to a bigger venue, Yeah,
and let me follow that with another question. Since we picked out New York as a place a training ground to be a stand-up comedian, to really like hone those chops there as well. What's the difference between New York and DC? Besides, for me, like just off the back, is like the industry. Like New York has industry, DC doesn't. And I think that's part of the thing, like the arts community here in DC could like invest more to make it. Cause like we have the people here, we have the talent. So how come there isn't industry here? And why do we have to leave? But like, besides the industry component, what separates New York from DC?
Well, I think he touched on it earlier. Sorry, I can't remember his name. The guy that said he was
Chip.
Doing flappers.
Chip Jones.
Chip Jones said it earlier. It's just the numbers. Like New York's a way bigger city. That's off the top. Why isn't?
Well, what's the biggest difference between New York and DC outside of industry?
The biggest difference is the size.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest difference is that DC is the capital. DC is more government. Like Chip said again. Like it's most of the people that work there work in government. New York is people that you got all walks of life in New York City. There's people that live right there. In DC, where you want to perform at, where the arts district is, where the comedy scene isn't really, to my knowledge, I don't know, I could be wrong, isn't a neighborhood. I don't think people live right there. It's like people come in from, Maryland, Virginia, other parts of DC into the arts district, the work area, and they leave. Whereas New York, it could be a comedy club under a project apartment. So people live right there, can come right down and see comedy, or It's more, I guess I'm saying it's more accessible in New York.
I think it's changed some though, because like we have like barkers on the street, which is where half the crowd comes from.
Right.
So like half of the crowd is from, you know, the neighborhood.
Right.
Like, you know, we have neighborhoods, Tony.
People live like, but I think again it gets back to the numbers
You're
because
like talking, you're talking about like your shows,
Right.
okay? Like at the Improv, okay?
but when
Those are the suburban people. Yeah.
When
But
we talk
at our
about
level.
numbers, what we're really saying is, you know, as an artist, you know, we're working on a different level than a promoter or a club. The numbers to them are dollars. That's money. So that's what propels an industry. That's why you don't have the same sort of underpinnings, is that we don't generate the kind of numbers that are going to have people that are further away from the art itself, the comedians, the direct clubs, the promoters. We don't have the numbers or the money generated that's going to support that next level of people that are all about just promoting the industry, that actually have no real sort of direct tie to the artists being performed immediately. And you know, we have the same problem in DC with filmmaking. You know, I mean, Tony, you know, I mean, Tommy, you know that. I mean, we don't have the same kind of underpinnings for creating movies in DC like LA, Chicago, or New York. And it's about money, which.
Right, but so, I mean, I think this part of the thing is, well, at least for me, is it's quite clear we have the talent here. We have the mechanisms, we have audiences, and for a myriad of different reasons, like how many, and we'll talk more about this later, but how many comedians come film their specials here in DC? Almost like every major comedian is filming their specials in DC, and not even just once. Like Chris, he did, I think, 2 or 3 specials here in DC. Literally everybody does. Louis C.K. just did a special here. He taped a bunch of shows that's coming out sometime this year, maybe, or next year. Yeah, pretty much everybody films specials here. From the movie scene, you know, most movies are about politics or some kind of like espionage, so they just film in and around the area. But you know, some of the security reasons, but you would think DC, the powers that be, would put the resources. There was BET, they were headquartered here for a while until they decided to dip out again. But like, what's not keeping the industry here? And I think that's, and maybe it's the investment, that type of thing. And again, to go on the numbers thing, like, I think one thing that makes DC such a unique place is, so we're going to talk about this now, is like for Black or urban comedy, for instance, I think this is probably one of the most unique places because like, we have probably the largest like Black middle class, upper middle class. So you don't just have like lower income. So you have very intelligent, college educated, like 6-figure workers in the area.
Yeah, Mitchellville's the biggest Black middle class in America. So.
Yeah. So we have a diverse Black. So if you're doing jokes, it doesn't have to be like all like really what they call like, you know, whatever. You know, they have different terms in the industry for like hitting like a Black audience.
Right.
But we have a very diverse Black audience here. We have a diverse white, like Asian, like so many different communities here. So this brings me to my next question. My next question is, now DC particularly, since was it 1970, which we had our first mayor, was Walter White, which was Walter, yeah, hold on, what was his name? Mayor Walter.
Washington.
Walter Washington, yeah, of course. Walter E. Washington, and he was the first mayor. And since then, we've had all Black mayors in DC's history. Like every mayor has been Black. And the DC was called Chocolate City. Like I think in 1950, I was doing some extra research. 1950 is when it used to be all white. Around 1950, the white people dropped out and moved out to the suburbs. And around 1970, it was predominantly probably like 70-80% African American here. I think that's when we got the nomer of Chocolate City. And due to gentrification, it's funny. Let me just make sure I got my statistics correct.
Yeah, we got
from 2000 and 2007, for instance, there's always been in DC, like I think a lot, you said Mitchellville is in Maryland. A lot of the from the riots, a lot of Black people moved out to the suburbs as well. So in DC proper, and this just shows like the little gradual change. In 2007, the median income for white people in DC was $116,000 a year. For the same time, in 2007, in DC, for Black income, the Black median income was $43,000 a year. That's like four times as much. That whites are making more than Blacks in DC, in the city that's had all Black mayors. So you think we'll be economically more incentivized or something. Secondly, and then we move on 2017, recently, and this is probably about accurate for now, the median income for Black people dropped from 2007 from $43,000 to $42,000 a year, while whites went up to $130,000. The average income for white people is $134,000 in DC, while the average Black income is only $42,000 a year. In DC, in Chocolate City, and the white and Black population are about even right now. So the thing is about like 47% a piece.
Right.
And so this kind of brings me to my question of why in a town which has historically been Black run, Black populated, why we still don't have Black ownership? There are no Black comedy clubs. I think in history, I can recall maybe like 2 or 3 Black comedy clubs here in DC. Black comedy is still not mainstream. You talk about mainstream versus urban, you would think that would be mainstream here because it was a predominantly Black town. And then we produced like from the Def Jam era, from Martin Lawrence, Tony Woods, Teddy Carpenter, all these people have come from here, but how come they're still not really accepted in the mainstream fold here in DC? So
it's so many questions in like
right.
It's like 9 questions you asked. So first, let's just say this: the same government that's fucking niggas in Compton and Bed-Stuy and South Side of Chicago and Southwest Atlanta and Detroit and
Michigan.
Detroit and Houston and Dallas. That same government, they fucking niggas in DC too. So that whole numbers, you know, that you think because those Black people are closer to the Washington Monument, they're gonna be let off the hook and be doing better than Black people anywhere else? No, the government is keeping niggas down. It's keeping niggas down everywhere. That's number one. Number two, the aesthetic of DC is what draws people there to shoot their specials. I'm gonna address that. You said that early on. So for any comic, for pretty much any comic, the draw of DC is that, like you said, there's upwardly mobile people. Everybody's, well, not based on those numbers, but pretty much most of the people are doing good in DC, right? For Black people, there's upwardly mobile Black people. Let's speak in terms of a Black comic that wants to shoot his special in DC. Aesthetically, it's beautiful women, good jobs, head on their shoulders, smart, educated. It's conducive to a great crowd. So when you say something, when you do a special, you're pretty much going to cover pop culture, government, race relations, if you're that kind of comic, relationships.
That's 100% right.
And when you cover those 4 things in DC, they are well versed in every one of those things. So whereas you might go to, he said Memphis earlier. Chip Jones said Memphis. You go to Memphis, you start talking about politics, you tuning out half the room. You talk about race relations, you tuning out half the room. You talk about relationships, half of them don't know. So DC is just conducive to a great comedy set because of the things that you're going to cover there.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Tony, because like I think that hits to Tommy's point, which is we have all of the ingredients for the perfect sort of audience here. Like one of the things I like about DC is that we get to practice, like, let's say you would play in your special, right? Like when we're practicing, we're getting that super diverse, super amazing audience that's helping us pretend like it's a headliner set and give us that sort of feedback at that level. But that is a really interesting point, that we have this amazing audience that's going to give us that great feedback. Why isn't the industry here more? You know, why aren't they here? I think it's because a lot of it, the government takes over.
I think it's
everything, and it sucks all the oxygen out.
It's money. And to the point what Tommy's talking about, you keep talking about DC having black mayors, like that means that it's run by black people. You know, our city budget is controlled by Congress. You know, it is white guys from Kentucky and Alabama that make the decisions on how DC spends the majority of its money. So we may have a black mayor as a figurehead, but they don't have the same kind of power as a black mayor in Atlanta or a black mayor in Oakland. They just don't have it. And like I said, everything about this is about money.
Tommy,
Yeah.
we got a question from somebody in the chat. His name is Al. So if you could put Al on real quick, Angel.
All right, come on, Al, ask your question, brother. Where you at?
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Hope you guys can hear me. I don't know how good my audio is. But this is a question that I put also in the chat, and it's a question I always like to ask creative people here in DC. I normally ask it of artists and comedians. You know, it's another form of art, right?
All artists.
So it's my question is related to whether or not you feel like the city itself, DC, supports artists and the artistic community and creativity. Is there a demand for it here in this city as opposed to other cities like New York City, where it seems like the public just puts an emphasis on arts and being entertained, where in DC it kind of seems like it's secondary to work. You know, it's like people here seem to feel like they can take it or leave it. Although comedy does tend to be a really popular source of entertainment here, surprisingly for me, in DC, and it produces great comedians like Dave Chappelle and great comedians in this region. But do you feel there's a support for it here in DC, and do you feel it does a good job of nurturing young talent as well, like in other cities? Like, can you make a life here as an artist, as a comedian? Thank you.
Hey, thanks for
Well,
your question.
he said, I usually ask this question of artists. We are artists.
Right, yeah.
We might be the best artists of them all.
Yeah, I agree. I think comedy is
number one.
definitely the hardest art form.
Secondly, again, it goes back to DC being government. DC is the government. The government doesn't put money into arts and science, things that the government looks at art like I could take it or leave it. So they don't really promote it. They don't put money into it because it's a government-run city. So they just trying to worry about, you know, the finances of the country and putting money into the military and putting money into taking money out of you know, things to put into other things. They don't look at the arts as something that should be promoted and really, you know, hoisted up for people to enjoy.
Yeah, it's really much, it's like, where do you work? It's like that whole thing.
Right.
Like, what can you do for me in my political career, sort of, and that kind of blinds everybody. Whereas like in New York, everyone's doing something weird. Okay, that's what makes New York, New York. That's why you love New York, because everyone is really, really weird, and they all do their own thing, and there's like 9 million of them. So like, whatever niche you want, what is it, like rule 36 of the internet, rule 34, I forgot what it is. If you spend enough time long enough on the internet, you're eventually going to find a porn about that thing. Right? In New York, if you spend long enough time there, you're eventually going to find whatever your niche is. Okay? Whatever it is. And so that kind of, in DC, that's not going to happen. You know, like, it's very hard to. Now, I can tell you on a micro level, dealing with business owners, by far the most important thing I look for when trying to figure out where to do a show is if the management is on board. If the management is on board, the show's almost always going to be successful. And the management has to be on board because they can't just be trying to make money. They also have to care about the art aspect of it. So on a small business level, pre-pandemic, the venues that we dealt with did care about art, but that is much more of a venue by venue basis and much less of like a cultural thing here. Like, you know, like in New York, everyone loves MoMA. Like that's, you know, and does LA have the Guggenheim or something like that? Like, we don't have that sort of huge art scene, right?
The
like
Smithsonian.
Yeah,
And that's true, because you know what, just to piggyback on what you said, damn, what was my point? You said it and I was trying to remember the point. It's like, damn, what was I going to say? Continue. It'll come back to me.
Well, I was just going to say the one thing that we have the Smithsonian, and sometimes that's a detriment because it is run by the government and it's free. You know, all these other things we talk about in other cities, people pay to go to those museums. And sometimes people hold cheap what they don't have to pay for. Same thing with, free open mics or free comedy. A lot of times the crowds you get are not the great crowds because they have not invested in it.
Yeah, so I would say, to answer Al's question, jump on that a little bit, I'll say yes and no. I think DC actually does recognize the value of artists and art here in the city. So the one of the partners of this panel here today is DC Commission on Arts and Humanities, and they actually put out some statistics. So like DC and the mayor, they've been for the last maybe 8-10 years have been like pushing arts a little bit. For me, I don't think in comedy, definitely not hard enough, but they recognize that arts inject, I think like 42, I forget the numbers, but I think it's like 42 billion, whatever. It's a lot of money that goes into the DC economy from arts, and they recognize that value. And so they've been like, so every year they have grants they give out, which I've looked around, like, I don't think many other cities do this. They have $7 million of grant money they give to artists. They have like, there's artist fellowship, which they just give you like $10,000 just to support in whatever kind of art you are engaged in. And I think holistically comedy, and that's why I think this is important, because comedy, I think is so vital and so big here, but it doesn't get the recognition of like painting or, like it's like, are you guys artists? Like us as an artist or whatever. So comedy in general doesn't get that kind of, I guess, recognition. So even here in DC, I think it should, and we should like probably put that to the forefront, because we have all these famous comedians from like Martin Lawrence to Chappelle, Woods, everybody, but there's really no tie back. So like a lot of times you don't even realize like these people from DC. So like, why would they, now they're in New York or LA or wherever they're at. And so that's kind of where they kind of lay hold, but there's never that, like, there's nothing tangible here back for them to really, tie to. Although I think there is some push from the government, and they definitely see the investment and they're trying to invest in it. But I think it could be a lot more here in DC.
Okay, so the point I was going to make earlier, that I think Jack said it, he was talking about how in New York we cultivate the art form. I think that we have to remember that, to run a stand-up, to run a comedy club, most owners are not interested in cultivating the art form of stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
Most comedy club owners are in for 2-drink minimum and asses in the seats. You don't own a comedy club because you love, very few owners own a comedy club because they love the art form so much, and they want to give a forum to these young artists to cultivate their material and go on to great, accomplishments. They own a comedy club because it's like, if I can get 300 people in here to buy 2 drinks and pay $20 at the door, that's a nice little come up. So they don't have the mindset of cultivating the art. Most people don't even look at stand-up as an art form. When again, I think it is the greatest art form that there is.
Dude, Tony, I think that's 100% right. Like, they run a club that happens to do comedy. Okay, the club could do dancing.
Sounds like Tony's talking about Dangerfields, man. You can't talk about it now; it's gone.
And actually, there's a club. I wish Tony Woods was here. It was called Garvin's. I think that was black-owned back in the day, and they shut down because it was like a salsa club or something.
Yeah, Garfield's.
They did comedy, and then they didn't pay their taxes, so the IRS shut them down.
Right.
And that's the thing. See, and no disrespect, and if it is, then you just take it how it is. But that's why a lot of black people don't own comedy clubs, Tommy, because black-owned comedy clubs are in it for the dollar more so than anybody else. So Monday might be comedy, Tuesday is fucking go-go, Thursday is a strip club. They just want money. They don't look at it like we cultivating an art form. Yeah, you go to any black comedy club in America and you'll see that today. It's like, they don't cultivate the art of stand-up comedy. They trying to make money.
Yo, that's true. Like, so I was doing some research on like, were there any black-owned comedy clubs other than Improv in DC? I think Teddy Carpenter had a comedy club for like a couple months. There was Garvin's, and then there was some place called the Comedy Cafe, and all those shut down pretty quickly. But Two of those were like downstairs was a strip club, so you had to walk through a strip club to get to the and that's why nobody wanted to come to it, you know. So
Right.
it only drew a certain type of audience.
Well, you know, Chappelle used to spend his time on the back stairs going from the comedy club to the strip club. That's where Tony would make him stay while he was watching him when he was up on stage. So.
Yeah, like try that on a date. Sorry, sweetheart, we have to go this way. Okay. I know they're naked.
Tried it on a date. Shit, I'll be upstairs working my dates downstairs on the pole.
A two-family income.
We have another question, Tommy.
Yeah, let's go to our audience. Who we have?
Gail. If you queue up Gail Angel, thank you.
Miss Gail, where you at, sweetheart? Or ma'am?
Maybe she won't be on screen.
You can just do audio if you want to.
I just answer a question for you. It was in the chat. She said, "What role do you think venues plays? Kennedy Center? Question mark." That's the question.
What role do you think that the Kennedy Center plays?
Yeah, I guess what type of the venues? What role does the venue play? And I think she used the Kennedy Center as an example.
Well, the Kennedy Center is when you have had an illustrious career, made impact comedically, theatrically. You gave back to the community. You are a standard that we hold you up as the standard for stand-up comedy. Then you go to the Kennedy Center and you're rewarded like Dave Chappelle was. So Kennedy Center plays a great role in doing that, but you have to put years and years of work in to get that acknowledgement.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only exception I would say would be the African American Museum, which has been trying to do that stuff. In fact, one of our friends, Sampson, is going to be back there in a couple months, and I know that Haywood Turnipseed has been there. I mean, I think they have recognized, especially for the Black community, that comedy has been one of the pillars of our community. So they have been trying to reach out to this art form.
And the Kennedy Center just opened up a new wing. I think what they call it, the lab. And so they a couple comedians have actually filmed some small specials there and done shows. And I think it's probably like maybe 150, 200 seater or something like that.
Yeah.
But so they're allowing like kind of more up and coming comedians access to that part. Not the main stage. Now the main stage you got the Mark Twain Award, Dave Chappelle, all them people. But yeah, so I think they're starting to kind of cultivate and see the importance of comedy here.
As far as like your question, I think that the venues are probably they play a very indirect role, particularly on booking and the show and everything. They're always there, kind of in the background, like waiting, like to judge anything that goes wrong or to like encourage you to do this or that. So like they certainly, at least most of our venues, they would like, be like, oh, I'm glad you have a fairly diverse lineup, but we didn't make money X night, or like we made a lot of money X night. And like, so my job as like the person helping run the show is to understand they have a restaurant and they want, like Tony was talking about, butts in the seats. So they might have some sort of social, let's say, judgment. Like, for example, with the Comedy Cellar and Louis, like I remember hearing a great article about like, when does Louis get to go back to the Comedy Cellar, And it's like, that's the venue's decision. Whatever the venue thinks their crowd is going to want, that's the decision they make. So all the venue cares about is getting butts in the seats. And then secondarily, they might care about the arts, or they might care about, something else. But like the venues, like if something happens at the show, I don't have insurance. Okay. I'm just a person putting on a show. Venue has insurance. So the venue is like the bottom line on every sort of decision that gets made. In particular, like a lot of times, if a venue wants to do a comedy show, that means, and to be candid, they're desperate. Okay, like they're just like, we just want people on our seats, anything. So, but a lot of times you do get a good venue, that'll give you a lot of help and support and has great management. But I guess to answer your question, they're pretty much the bottom line on any major decision.
Yeah. So I want to on the venue topic, and Tony was just on. I was just watching this the other day. The Comedy Store. They have a show on Showtime, and you were on there speaking about that venue. Now I think we talk a little bit, like as an up and coming comedian, like repetition, you have to have the repetition. One thing I noticed, and they mentioned in the Comedy Store show, was a lot of, let's say like you're an established comedian, like you've been in it for a while, you have a solid set. One guy was like, yo, I was killing it, but I didn't really change my routine up. I wasn't like working to build new material. And so I got kind of like stagnated or whatever. For an established comedian or, superstar such as yourself, what tips, because it's, and I guess it's different for different people, but as far as like working out your craft, how would you say you should go about that? Being that you're already in it for like a number of years.
Well, I'll speak for myself. I'm on stage. I just love stand-up, so I'm on stage as much as possible, as humanly possible, just because I love it that much. I don't look at like, I booked something, so now I can go on stage less, or I'm going to be on this show, so now I don't have to go on as much. I go on as much as I possibly can. I have a show tonight, as a matter of fact, outside in Hollywood. But for myself, the motivation has always been that if you think somebody's better than me, I have work to do. And I don't mean it personally, because I know everybody has their own opinion on who they like, and I might not be in what the names you mentioned, but I definitely want to be. So if there's a group of people talking about stand-up and my name doesn't come up, then I think I have work to do. And I've always looked at it like that.
That's like, oh my God, Tony, that's great. Sorry, I just like starry-eyed. Go ahead, Tommy.
I was gonna say that ethos has kind of changed. I mean, that is a mentality that's 5-7 years now in comedy, because before that, I mean, Louis C.K. did the same 45-minute set for 15 years when he was opening for Seinfeld. And, that stuff sort of came across with HBO comedy, where people would do a set on HBO and then, pack it up and start working on a new set. But for years, touring comics did the same stuff, like I said, for over a decade. So,
well, if you're touring, you can do the same. Like if you're a road comic, I would imagine that road comics do the same set from city to city to city. Right. But if you're the rule I was always taught is that once you do it on TV, you have to retire.
Exactly. And so more people are getting exposure like that.
I didn't hear what you said, Chip. Sorry.
I was saying more people are getting exposure like that, with Comedy Central and stuff. So now they start out as being a touring comic, and then they blow up, and then they do their half hour, 40 minutes on Comedy Central, and now they're forced to start writing material again and do something new because they can't keep touring on that. Like I said, that's something that has become new because the industry has changed.
Well, I think in DC though, it's completely different because and this might be true everywhere, but you say you write for the audience, but to an extent you write for your comic friends. You're trying to get them to laugh, and you want them to be like, oh, that's a good joke or a good set. So in order to do that, you have to constantly turn over jokes, and you have to constantly write new jokes, right? And so like one of the things that's really good, I think, about the DC scene here is there's like a very much a culture of discipline, at least at the, the level of people who are funny, of like pushing each other to write that new joke to impress your friends.
And what's weird, like right now, the time that we're in a pandemic. So unfortunately, however long this lasts, that comedy's not in its normal stage, a lot of people's material is going to be dated. So every comic should be writing right now like crazy, but just because the world is so crazy right now.
Well, there's a whole underground of Zoom comedians that are constantly writing and constantly performing. I'm doing shows in Tokyo and Russia and England and Malaysia, writing new material, and also now moving from the DC writing stuff that's not regional. Now I'm writing stuff that's global, that the jokes I do, for a show out of Utah, they've got to work for a show that's coming out of Bangladesh, it's like, or India, so there are a lot of people working the craft.
That's a testament to how much material the world is giving us right now. Right. There's no shortage of material. You just got to find it. And right now, it's just the world is full of material. There's a lot of stuff every comic should be writing every day.
Right.
And this else about what Jack said about we write for the audience. I honestly, I tell you 100% truth. I don't give a fuck about the audience. I think one of the
Sorry for my
biggest
friends. But I hope the audience laughs.
one of the biggest misconceptions is that comics write jokes for the audience. We don't.
Yeah.
We write jokes that we think are funny. Comics,
exactly.
we write jokes we think are funny. If you laugh, then you agree. But to try to make every single person in the audience laugh at one joke is you would kill yourself.
Right.
So you write a joke you think is funny. If they laugh, they agree. That's why nobody's ever going to get 100% of the room, because everybody's going to always feel this person feels like it was hilarious. This person's like, oh, it wasn't that funny. This person's like, I kind of got it. I think he should have said something. But you write what you think is funny.
Yeah.
Right.
Can I get that shirt, Tony? I thought it was funny. There's your merch.
But you know,
like your joke, bro.
the thing you'll find though, doing these Zoom mics is how common we all are. Like, you can do jokes about slavery that I've always done here in DC, and they work for the Indians because they had the same white colonialism as we had. You know, it works for South Africans because the blacks there had the same Dutch colonialism. So it's like you begin to understand the concepts that you think are sort of regional actually
and I think right now too, like with the pandemic, like everybody in the world is going through the exact same thing. So it's like it makes like all your jokes right now internationally relatable. So like if you can, and I'm saying like here in DC, like you have a certain climate, but in the past, or like in New York, LA, like different vibes. Like now everybody's going through the same vibe. So if you can't find jokes or something that resonates with people now, like you're never going to find it. So we're going to start wrapping up now. Appreciate everybody's input.
Tommy, before you wrap up, there was someone who asked the question, what could they do for comedy in DC? Come to shows.
Yeah.
Come to shows. Just come to shows. Like that's like, please, Autumn, come to shows.
And so I did see someone say something about Ward 8, which is, and this is Southeast. For those in DC, in the DC DMV area, Southeast is where the chocolate still lives, in the hood. And another thing is there are very few comedy shows on that part of town. And I've recently been doing my Almost Ladies Night comedy series.
I knew the plug was coming. It wasn't just like a social commentary.
But we've been doing our shows in Southeast strategically outdoor, and it's a beautiful backyard area. We're doing outdoor shows, making COVID friendly. But I think it's also important to have the diversity in the city, and like everybody puts shows on in certain parts of town, and you kind of see like the in a way lack of diversity of the demographics here in the city. So I think it's also important that we make it more inclusive scene. So I think with that said, I guess my final question would be, if you could like pick one thing that you would improve in the DC comedy scene, what would that be? And besides coming to shows, since you just said that, but give me one more thing that we could improve in the DC comedy scene to make it a more vibrant platform, city for comedians. And Jack, I'll start with you.
I think I would start with the Black-owned club. Power comes from wealth, you know? And so, like, I think having a Black-owned club with a Black-owned business owner and a Black booker, you know, like would change just the inherent opportunities in the scene. Now, I mean, Tommy,
okay, ally, I see you, son.
I'll invest. Okay, like, it's a great idea. Tommy, you and I have talked about this, and we've talked about this in other groups about like just the opportunities here, and a lot of it comes from the gentrification. It comes from other things, and so there's a huge lack of diversity at the top level in DC, and there is also at the entry level. We're working to solve that problem, but at the top level. And so having a place that is, you know, booked from a perspective that all of the other places aren't booked from just inherently would change all of the calculus. So that's the one thing that I think would change a lot.
Okay. Let me go to my we'll finish up with Tony. Mike, Mike B, our comedian and our resident chat ambassador. One thing you would change in DC comedy scene.
Not booking me. I need people to book me more. I need all the stage time I could get. I need more bookings. No, I think more discipline from the comics. DC has an open door policy when it comes to people that want to pursue their wet dream of doing comedy. And a lot of times they jump in and they don't take it seriously, and then they just take up all the stage time, and then boom, they quit. And you know, one thing I like about LA and New York, they have a way of sniffing those people out really quick, and getting rid of them. And I think we need to sniff those people out, because a lot of times they make the scene worse because they don't like the discipline or the love for the actual art of comedy.
You talking about the person Jack beat up?
Well, he's one. He's one.
All right, and brother Tony, what would you say, bro?
Hey, you know what, Mike? I just want to say this. And you said that's one of the things you like about New York.
Yeah.
You know what? You know what we have in New York that separates all the bullshit?
What's that?
We have the winter. I'm dead serious. In the summertime, if you do the numbers in the summertime in New York City, every open mic is packed. Everybody's like, I'm signing up for open mic. I'm going up. The Barkers are getting full audiences because everybody wants to try stand up in the summertime because the girls are out and the weather's nice. As soon as Jack Hawk comes around and that fucking Hawk starts nipping at your nose, everybody that was like, oh, I'm gonna be a comic, they in the house. So when the winter come, all the real comics in the summertime, we just sit back like, okay, you a comic now? Okay, good. Once around into September, like into October, November start coming, they all, so we don't even worry about that. What I would do to make the DC comedy scene better, and I just thought about this in the last 10 seconds that Tommy asked it. I think that the DC Improv should operate like a comedy club on Monday, Tuesday. I think they do Thursdays through Sunday with a headline. Right? For Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, they should have a lineup like the Comedy Store or the Laugh Factory and make it ground central for the development of comedy in DC. Mm-hmm. So you come in on a Monday night and it's Tommy Taylor and then Jack and then Mike and then Chip and then so-and-so, and then they might have a drop-in because DC has so many beasts, like you said. Martin Lawrence might be in town that weekend. Boom, he drops in. Dave Chappelle might pull up that weekend and drop in. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday operate like a comedy club to cultivate the art form that we know is already there and build it up. And then Thursday through Sunday be a headliner club.
That's a good answer.
I mean, Tony, you know people.
Amen, Tony.
Give her a call, Tony. Give her a call.
Yes.
All right.
Pretty strong answer.
Last 2 points. Jack said a black-owned comedy club with a black comedy club with a black owner and a black booker. Yes, a black booker that understands the art form, not just a guy that's black that books comics, because he's gonna have Shuttlebug and slice of baloney. Yeah, like a guy that understands how to book a comedy club and understands
a woman.
Lastly, okay, a woman is fine. Lastly, Tommy Taylor and I have talked about this. I actually reached out to Tommy and told him that I love what he was doing with Almost Ladies Night Out. I believe it has a bigger platform. I think he should shoot a sizzle reel and pitch it as a TV show, as a sketch comedy show that opens up with Tommy as host, like Keenan would open in Living Color. Then you got sketch comedy, you got the games he plays with the audience, and then you end it with a stand-up comic. I think that'd be a great half-hour TV show to watch. And if you want to talk about it further, I'm more than willing to talk about
it.
Hey, Tony, you should change your name from your bank password. I just noticed that.
Can I chime one thing in?
Yeah.
The money is not there for the Improv to be open Monday through Wednesday. We need another way to generate this, and it's something that I tried to pitch them before. Every year, there's a thing that's called Close Up, where kids come from all over America to see their government. And we're talking, close to 10,000 kids that come in. If we, as comedians, could come up with comedy, whether it's sketch, improv, or whatever, that's designed for that market, we could market that to those guys. They spend a ton of money trying to entertain these kids outside of meeting their senators. That would generate income that could keep the Improv open Monday through Wednesday. They would do it during the day because these kids definitely have a window where they've got to be back in the hotel rooms by 7 o'clock. And then the Improv could take the wealth they make from that income during the early hours and spend it on having open mics for comics to work their trade at night. But
well, there you go. We just solved the problem.
Those are the things that, as a collective, we need to work at, coming up with solutions for venues so that they can make money to support us.
From the Starship Enterprise, Chip Jones.
Y'all telling me that's not a troop jacket he got on?
And right before we close, I so appreciate everybody's time coming through and your insight and words of wisdom. Tony, Jack, Mike B. I do have one other special guest from the DC comedy scene, Urban Comedy Flavors, Big Ed. Let's see if you got something to chime in real quick. Can you spotlight Ed? Where you at, Ed?
Yo.
Hey, what's going on, brother? So Ed runs some big shows. You sold out a bunch of arenas and stuff like that. You have any a quick word to say about DC comedy scene before we wrap up?
Only thing I wanted to touch in on, I think Tony and was it Chip? They was trying to say DC wasn't run by the government.
No, Tony didn't say that.
Jack didn't say that.
No. Or it wasn't run by black people. I'm sorry.
No, I think they. Someone said that.
Congress controls much of our money.
Right. But Marion Barry, by doing the 80s and 90s, DC was the only black city run by black people.
Yeah, but if you look, you had black mayors, but the purse strings were controlled by Congress, as they still are now. That's why we need statehood. That's why we need statehood.
But the Congress didn't take over till like 2000. 80s and 90s, Marion Barry ran everything, and the city council.
Marion Barry was the face of everything. He didn't run it.
What didn't he run?
Oh boy.
What did he run?
What didn't he run? I said, what didn't he run?
Boy.
So, I think there's some nuances here. So, like, DC does have a say in like how things are ultimately distributed, but the government, the Congress, appropriates the monies.
Right. We have limited homeroom, but we don't control our finances, and that's why we want statehood.
You got to pass. If you want to get around the rules, you pass 90-day pieces of legislation. That's how they've done a lot of stuff. That's how they did weed initially. That's how they did other things. So like you have to pass that, and then Congress can't overturn the emergency legislation. But like this is the whole problem. Yeah, I mean Chip's right. With like we were going to get a vote, and then Utah was going to get an extra electoral vote, and then somebody from I don't know Mississippi or somewhere screwed it up, and here we are.
So with all that said, make sure y'all niggas vote. You got a mail in the ballot text message. I don't know what they're doing right now. I went and voted in person yesterday, actually. Make sure you vote. You have a right to vote. Make sure you do it. Even in DC, it doesn't count for much, but make that little vote count. All right. So yeah, all right. Well, we're gonna wrap up, man. I really, again, I appreciate everyone joining in, logging on. Again, this was a presentation in partnership with Humanities DC and DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities. And Tony, you should wear that shirt tonight at your show. I would. I can't pay you, but yeah, dude.
I appreciate.
That's Pima Cotton. It's Pima Cotton, bro.
I appreciate talking to all y'all.
It's nice, bro.
I appreciate talking to all of y'all. I love talking comedy. I love when people are, like-minded and have insight into the thing that I love the most. And I appreciate just being on the panel.
Hey, thank you so much. Any last words, Jack?
Follow us on Instagram, HumanitiesDC. We got a show this weekend. It is in Columbia Heights. If you want to come, please do come. It's on Eventbrite. It's with Alex English, very funny guy. He's coming down here. He's gonna do some time. We're trying to get as many like New York comics to come down here, and like they get to just run their hour on a weekend night or two. We charge like $10. It's a lot of fun. you get to like do an hour, and then like people who don't normally get to see you. And so, you know, Alex is coming down. It's on Halloween. Costume contest, prize winners. Boom.
Awesome.
There's my plug.
So, all right, and then we have Brother Billy over your sign. You want to say something before you go? No. All right. Well, appreciate our amazing panelists. Tony Woods, his houseboat, the Wi-Fi got away. He couldn't make it. That's Tony. And I was just with him last night. He's like, hey man, I'm gonna be there, man. I'm with you. He sent me a picture of him in his shirt like an hour ago. But hey, anyway, if y'all happen to be in New Jersey, make sure you check out Tony next weekend with young Jordan.
November 12th through the 15th, New Brunswick, New Jersey, Stress Factory Comedy Club. Tony Rock and the amazing young Jordan Rock on the show together.
Okay.
Yes, and we have a bunch of comedians in the audience, so thank y'all for coming in, tuning in, and sharing input in the chat room and everything. With all that said, God bless and good night.
Peace.
Thank y'all.